Mm.
I'm very curious to, well, two things. We have somebody in the waiting room who I think will really add to this conversation, and I would love to hear from somebody in the medical field who, well, some of us are in the medical field, but somebody who can give us some perspective when she sees patients coming in to talk about being assaulted in that moment. The other thing that I wanted to say was that everybody that I've spoken to about this, like all the guys that I talked to who have reached out to me, the first thing they ask me is, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you tell us right away? We would have squatted up and, gone and did whatever. And me being the calculated person that I am, I feel like I was very cognizant of the fact that because a lot of people care about me, if I were to say something at that particular moment, I wasn't sure the kind of, number one, violence that could have ensued out of my me saying that. The other thing was also the fact that, like, I was so shaken up by the lack of trust, the breakage of the betrayal, the trust breaking of that particular action, that I wasn't even sure if what I had experienced was real. There was a lot of self-doubt. There was a lot of like, did I, what really actually happened in this moment? And when when I'm narrating this story and like expressing my frustration with why I didn't express this in the beginning, there are people who have told me, well, guys will try you. Like if you had, maybe if you've given him some signs, he might do something to try you. I think in our community, because most of us immigrated from a different system, a system where this is kind of okay. It's not in general sense. Nobody should be doing this to anyone. But back home, this system is considered okay. That when
Not to cut you off, Louisa, this kind of brings me to my next question. Because you were saying something about this is kind of okay back home. We all know that Africa in general is a patriarchal kind of system, right? And so what role does patriarchy play in sexual assault?
Well, there's power. I think like there's a lot of power, right? Like, because when we think about like power and control, like that's what sexual assault is about, power and control. It's not about sexual desire at all. And so when we think about like a system of like unregulated, toxic masculinity, like it's this idea that I have to control in order to feel good. I have to control in order to do. And so I feel like when we don't give a voice to women, like we automatically like take away something, right? And we automatically start to add more violence in situations. And I think like that type of system is it, because it's not the idea that, oh, men can't have power, but how are you using this power, right? Like you are using this power to wield something, a tool of destruction, basically, to tear somebody down. And that is where the issue happens. And so I feel like that's why like I think it's a huge reason why I feel like sexual assault happens. And I think like, and I know that we're talking like more in the African context, but I don't want it to be lost that like this is global. It's a global issue, right? Absolutely. And I think sometimes we think in America, oh, well, things are better, and it's not. We just love to hide things in America. Like we just are really good at that, rather than like outside of the country, like it's just upfront about it.
Yeah, I think it's important. I was going to make 2 points. I think it's important, though, even though it is a very global issue, just like my sister said, I also kind of tried to look up statistics that was very specific to the niche of African women or even first generation, sexual assault survivors. And that are African, and I could not find any. I thought that was incredibly jarring. And my second point to that is that, so this conversation is very important. Us as African women having this conversation is very important. Secondly, regarding the patriarchy, it's also important to realize that women, especially African women, even sometimes our parents, our aunties, our mothers, unfortunately, add to the perpetuation of the patriarchy and keeping the patriarchy up that ends up making us be quiet when we are sexually assaulted. There are, I mean, I don't want to make a generalization, but I know for me and the stories that I've heard, I don't know how many of us have been able to go to our parents, our mothers, our aunties about this. And it's very problematic.
You're right. So like with the stats for like sexual assault in Nigeria per se, like there's really none. I remember like when I first moved to the States, one of my aunt's friends, her husband was hitting the shit out of her. And they had like, I think 2 or 3 boys, or she had 2 boys and she was pregnant for the other one. I don't even know how many kids they had, but I remember that she had kids and they were hitting the shit out of this woman to the extent, like the crazy thing about it was that the people around her telling her, oh, you have to stay for the boys. You have to stay for this and that and the third. And then like, even like with the abuser self, in abusive situations, your abuser makes sure that you have no means to take care of yourself without them, you know? So like she was in a situation where she didn't have anything for herself in that situation. If she was without him, there's no way she could have, well, eventually she might have found a way, probably, you know, but like in that situation, in that moment, she didn't have any option for herself because he has created a situation where she's totally dependent on him. And this is what you see in a lot of like African homes. And where, again, this is where patriarchy also comes in. Like I tell my sister, she has 2 boys. I tell her, you have to raise your boys the same way you raise your girls. You have to raise your girls the same way you raise your boys. You cannot do this. We can't keep repeating generational problems each generation that we go past. We technically, all of us on this call, we are people, we are going to be moms in the next couple of years. And God help us, let us not be the ones that will say, oh, Chukwuemeka or Tunde can't sit in the room. So this person, Ada and Bolanle will come and cook. So you can come and enjoy the profits. What kind of nonsense is that? We have to create a situation whereby the boys know that they also, we too are prizes. The same way that they consider themselves prizes, we too are prizes. So we have to raise our kids in such a way where they can identify, okay, I'm also worth something. Because they've created a situation where women almost feel like they don't have anything. They are not worth anything. You're just a woman. So therefore.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there was something that I wanted to say in the context of our diaspora, right? And there was this echoing theme that kept on coming up. It's like the preservation of the family name and pride, and like, you know, having pride within, you know, like yourself and your family name. That like if I go say something about something that happened to me, be it a family member, be it a friend, a family friend, whatever, it would destroy the family name in some way, or it would destroy the other person's family name. And we're so caught up in keeping up appearances in our particular culture that certain things go unsaid because we're trying to preserve this kind of pride or whatever surrounding our situations. And I feel like that plays a part into why people don't just go about reporting. Like I thought about, what would be the impact, you know, if people heard that this happened to me or whatever. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. People who assault other people need to be reported, and that's the one thing that I've learned in this particular
and also kind of just speaking on what you just said, like I always think about like, oh man, what am I gonna do to someone that I reported on? What am I gonna do to their family? And also, like, you know, everyone came here for a better life, right? And a lot of us are high achieving Africans, right? Most of us are in medical school. We're going to be lawyers. We're in IT. We're doing this. We're doing a lot of big things. And for you to now, I feel like for me to now say, oh, this person assaulted me and then completely ruined their life is that's what I start thinking. A lot of women also think the same way. But the thing is, people who do this need to be reported. We should not cover up for someone who thinks it's okay to violate someone else.
Right.
So we're gonna move on to the next question. I believe Louisa actually was the one that was talking to a group of she was talking to a couple of her guy friends, and they were saying how no, saying no here is different from no in Africa. What do you guys what do you
It
guys
is.
think about
So
that?
I think in general, like a lot of people, not just men, but women included, they don't fully grasp the concept of consent and what it means to say, I give you permission or I don't give you permission. And I think like some people, even guys who like believe like they understand consent, think that it has to be verbal and they don't look at like body actions either, but all of that like is under the umbrella of consent. So like no, for starters, if you don't have consent, that's no consent. Like that's just no consent. No consent is no consent. You don't have permission to do this. Or if you're interacting with someone and their body language, even if they gave you permission at the beginning, like I don't think people understand that, like you can change your mind at any point in time and say I no longer consent to this. Or even in the middle, like if you like just stop responding and they're not enthusiastically giving you consent, then that's like no consent. And I don't think a lot of people understand what that means, which is why when people report their stories, they're like, well, she went here and she did this up until this point. So like there's holes in the story. And I just think that it, like not understanding what consent truly is, just like it just confuses a lot of people, and it makes stories sound like they have holes, when in reality, like they don't have holes. This person didn't have consent to do what they were doing, even though this person was present there. And I think like another thing is people think that sexual assault has to be violent, or like somebody needs to be like bruised before you believe that this person was like touched in a way that they didn't want to be touched. So I think everyone has like this illustration of what they personally believe rape to look like, or what they personally believe like consent should look like, when it's really distorted.
Anyone else?
I was going to say, off of what Toby said, the whole conversation around consent until the question that you brought up, I feel like that in itself, in a certain way, guys saying when girls say no in Africa versus when girls, when African girls say no in America are two different things. There's something to be said about that. I'm not going to say it's true. I'm not going to say it's right, because obviously there's a bigger problem there, because no should be no everywhere globally. I think there is an education aspect missing with consent for men and women that are currently living in, different countries in Africa. So that's that educational gap. And that might be why they say, oh, no means no, that no doesn't really mean no there. So that's one point. However, I mean, I guess it's good that they know that no might mean no for American women, but why can't you just relay that? Like you're a man, you're the person entering into this situation with somebody else. Why can't you just carry that same notion all throughout, like in America, in the UK, in Nigeria, wherever you may be? Like, why should there be a distinguishing factor there? That in itself is problematic.
I think to add to, and maybe try to have a full circle moment here, this also brings back to like the whole patriarchy thing with Africans and the continent, and how men are just a man and they must essentially get what they want. And so the gist of like, no, they just don't comprehend that, you know what I mean? So I think that just brings it back to the differences between
I guess, sexual assault here, and the definition of sexual assault here and the definition of sexual assault back home, where men just essentially like, I'm a guy, I'm supposed to always get what I want. So yeah, I am in this situation, I will get what I want. And even if girls are saying no,